Chapter 13, Craven, Fear, and Moody. One morning, very early, when Grace and Glory was walking near the pool and cascade where she had first kept tryst with the shepherd, she met her aunt, Mrs. Dismal Forebodings, and her cousin, Gloomy. They were both wearing their beautiful garments of praise, and there was something so unusual and eager in their manner that Grace and Glory gazed at them in astonishment that they were going to meet the shepherd at her old trysting place. She had no doubt, but the expression on their faces suddenly awakened her happy suspicions, and she could not restrain her curiosity. So after greeting them affectionately, she said, "Where are you going at this early hour? For you look exactly as though you are starting on a journey." Mrs. Dismal Forebodings and Gloomy looked at each other and for a moment said nothing, for a journey to the high places is a secret affair and may not be paraded before others. Grace and Glory saw the look which passed between them and gave a joyful little laugh. "I know," she said, "but I will not ask you about it, for I know you are going with the shepherd, and that he has told you not to speak of it. But I wish you a good journey and a safe arrival at the high places. And oh, may you get there quicker than I did and learn all the lessons on the way with joy instead of with fear and shrinking." Her aunt looked at her lovingly and gratefully, but she was still Mrs. Dismal Forebodings, and at the very beginning of the journey, and still without the right to a new name. So she answered, "Thank you, my dear. Yes, we are going with the shepherd, old and dreary as I am, and of as little use to him as I can expect to be. And though I am afraid I am too old ever to be able to develop hinds feet and to go prancing about as you do, Grace and Glory, yet the shepherd has promised to take me to the high places and to give me a new name, and I know that I can trust him to do what he has promised." The look of love and trust which shone in her eyes as she spoke the last words made her suddenly appear so beautiful that Grace and Glory was filled with wonder. Her cousin Gloomy put both arms around her neck and kissed her twice without saying a word, then took her mother's hand, and on they went to the trysting place to meet the shepherd. Grace and Glory hurried toward the village, thinking of Spiteful, left behind in the dreary attic. How would she manage now without the cheer of the daily visits of her sister and mother? What must she be feeling at being left behind? She found Spiteful, who was still weak and not yet fully recovered, moving about the miserable attic and singing a little song with a look of wonderful peace and content upon her face. At first, Grace and Glory hardly knew what to say. "Did you meet my mother and Gloomy on your way here, dear Grace and Glory?" asked Spiteful, kissing her affectionately. "Yes," she answered, "I met them near the trysting place." Spiteful nodded. "Yes," she said happily, "they have gone with the shepherd. He is going to take them to the high places. It is too wonderful and lovely for words." Grace and Glory looked at her, still unable to say a word. "I know what you are thinking," said Spiteful with a gentle and understanding little smile. "You are wondering about me and how I can bear to be left behind in this attic." Grace and Glory nodded, still without speaking. Then Spiteful said softly, "I couldn't go with them, you know, because in a few days' time my husband will be coming out of prison, and there would be no one to welcome him or to care for him. But Grace and Glory, the shepherd has told me that there is a way to the high places, even from this attic, and that though I cannot make the journey with my mother and sister, yet I may go there just as surely by this other way. So you see, I am not left behind, Grace and Glory looked round the miserable attic where the wife of poor Moody, timid, skulking, was awaiting his return from prison, and suddenly she understood. She remembered the little golden flower, acceptance with joy, which she had found blooming in the wilderness, and the blood red flower bearing with love or forgiveness, which grew in the prison house of the rocks on the great precipice. And she realized that they were growing here too in this stifling attic, and that here indeed there was a shortcut, steep and agonizing beyond anything which she herself had faced, but a real shortcut to the altar and the grave on the mountains on the very borders of the high places. She also understood that her cousin's spiteful, but how could she call her by that name again, was likely to arrive at the high places even before her mother and sister. She rose with a feeling of awe in her heart, and putting her arms around her cousin, said gently, "Cousin, when the shepherd told you about this shortcut to the high places, did he say anything to you about a new name?" Her cousin blushed a little and then said hesitatingly, "He said he would give me a new name while I wait here until my husband can go to the high places too, but the name would be just between himself and me. It was written on a little white stone, which he gave me when he planted the seed of love in my heart, a new name which no one knows save she that receives the stone." "No one knows?" exclaimed Grace and Glory with a little tremble in her voice. "Why, this is very queer, for he has written it on your forehead for all to see. Didn't you know that?" "No," said she. "No," said her cousin wonderingly. "He gave me the white stone to carry in my heart, but he said nothing about a new name written on my forehead." "What name is that, Grace and Glory? Why is it one of his own name? Why, it is one of his own names," said her cousin very softly. "He has marked you with the name Compassion." "That is a lovely, lovely name," said the girl who had been known as spiteful. That exactly expresses his attitude to me. But I don't think it is my name, Grace and Glory. I think it is just the mark of his own compassion and gentleness set there to show that I now belong to him." "Well," said her cousin after a little pause, "I certainly cannot call you by the old name any longer, and the name on the white stone is a secret between you and him, so I think we really must call you by the lovely name which is written for all to see on your forehead." Then she laughed a little and said, "Compassionate, I will sing you a song especially meant for attic dwellers." And she sang this song: "O thou afflicted, tempest tossed, in sorrow's pathway led, behold, thy suffering is not lost. Thou shalt be comforted. In fairest colors thou shalt shine, and precious jewels shall be thine. Foundation stones of bright sapphires shall garnish all thy flowers. Thy ruby windows glow like fires, and emeralds make thy doors. And all thy walls and borders be of precious stones and porphyry. Fear not, thy trust ends not in loss. I'll not put thee to shame. There is a purpose in thy cross, and no reproach and blame. One day with glad exultant voice, thou child of sorrow shalt rejoice. Stretch forth the curtains of thy tent, lengthen the cords, spread wide, strengthen the stakes with great content. Break forth on every side, thine anguish is no barren birth. Thou shalt have seed through all the earth." Isaiah 54:11 and 12. "What a lovely song!" exclaimed Compassionate, and her eyes were shining like the jewels of the song. Where did you learn it, Grace and Glory? The shepherd taught it to me on the way up to the high places, and I wrote it down after I got up there. Why is it called a song for attic dwellers? Asked Compassionate. Where else could it be possibly be sung with greater meaning and effect? Asked her cousin with a laugh. It has all the force and beauty of contrast and all the glory of promise and fulfillment. Sing it and fulfillment. Sing it again, begged Compassionate. Sing it over and over again until I have learned it by heart. So Grace and Glory taught her cousin the attic song, just as Sorrow had taught her the song about the hind's feet when she was limping on the mist shrouded mountains. And as they sang, the dreadful little attic really did seem to undergo a transformation before their very eyes. It seemed to sparkle with glittering jewels, as though it were a room in a palace, and the bare, ugly walls appeared to have melted away, leaving only a